Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155.
From UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not?
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcast. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championships, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championships, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Arnold De Leon, and hopefully you are doing well for yourself. You, your friends, your family, whether you live in the States or internationally, I hope you are doing fine for yourself. And you know what? Wash your hands, stay safe, be healthy, just do good for yourself right now, because in the year of 2020, things are very complicated. And so coming up this Saturday, by the way, it's so strange though that there was a period in time where there was no sports happening. Now we got hockey. I just saw an empty hockey game for the first time. It was ridiculous. I saw on TV. I was like, what the heck? Like, it's a strange sight to see. Even though I should be used to it, considering the fact that I've been watching the UFC a lot. It's still strange to see, especially in team sports, because right now, right next to me, I'm currently watching the Utah Jazz / Memphis Grizzlies game. I'm trying to keep up with the seedings and what's happening in the tournament, where the standings for the teams right now in the bubble. And it's still bizarre because they have fake audiences for the NBA game. For NHL games, they have no one there. They just have sound popping in and sound emulating fans cheering. But for the NBA, they're doing like a live stream. I don't know how this works. So they're showing a virtual crowd, but it's real people. It's real people. And then they're doing like a Zoom chat, or they're all watching it together. Like, these are real people reacting and interacting in real time to what's actually happening to the game. But they're real people. And there's like 40 of them, well over 40 of them, and they're being shown on a big monitor screen from left to right to the basketball players. It's very bizarre. It really is. Because these are real people. There's like a Zoom or a Skype chat that's on it. Like, I swear, like, there's like a bottom left, there's like a Skype like logo or something like that, or a Zoom logo. And you're seeing all these fans out there. They're wearing their jerseys. Whenever there's a player with a free throw, they're like moving their arms a lot. They are reacting to what they're seeing onto the court. And it's very strange because some of them are not even looking at the actual basketball game. They're just on their phone the entire time, or they're like really bored. They're trying to emulate the crowd. And it's very bizarre. And then you have piped in fake noises for the crowd. And I was wondering, would it be strange if they added random noises onto a UFC event? Because UFC 3, or is it 4? The next UFC game is right around the corner. And I'm pretty sure there's a sound sample of crowd noises they can use, that they have used for the UFC video game. So why can't they just emulate that and have fake UFC crowd noises come in when the fighters are going to the octagon or reacting? I'm pretty sure it won't be that difficult. Though it would be strange to know how to emulate it in a live setting. I wouldn't know how they do that, because for the NBA games, they have monitors. They have giant monitors, and they have like a fake chair, and you got people through Zoom. It's easy to replicate it in an NBA game, but it'd be really interesting to see if the UFC to replicate crowds being there, or to replicate crowd noises to go drown out all the other like people talking. You got the cornerman talking, you got the referee talking, you got the judges kind of murmuring to each other. You got people talking in the stands, like UFC execs. You got the commentary team. The fighters up to this point can hear everything that commentators are saying. They can hear it. We've heard of fighters who fight in Fight Island, or fight recently during this time of the pandemic and during the bubble. They said they can go hear every single thing that's happening from the commentator side. Like, while they are fighting, it actually is distracting for the commentators to be talking. So, you know what? fake crowd noises, it'd be bizarre. Like, can you imagine, like, cause right now, coming up, this upcoming UFC event has Derrick Lewis against Aleksei Oleinik. Can you imagine if Derrick Lewis were to knock out Aleksei Oleinik, and then you hear this, like, fake, loud crowd noise being like, yeah, Derrick Lewis, woo! It'd be very bizarre. It really would. But coming up, this Saturday, August 8th, will be UFC Fight Night, Lewis vs. Oleinik. Derrick Lewis vs. Aleksei Oleinik is the main event. Then we got Omari Akhemedov against Chris Weidman. That's a huge question mark fight for me. I don't get why Weidman would match up somebody as good as Omari. I think stylistically wise, it's a bad matchup for Weidman. I don't know why he would accept that, but it's a great fight for Omari. We got Maki Potolo against Darren Stewart. I am really high on Darren Stewart. But then again, this is the UFC, anything can happen here. But I'm very high on Darren Stewart in this fight. I can't wait to see what he does. A very strange one here. We got Julia Stoliarenko against Yana Kunitskaya. Wow. Julia Stoliarenko. Wait, this is Stoliarenko's first fight in the UFC, is it? Is it her fight in the UFC? Because she came in from Invicta and she had one of the best fights of the... Okay, yeah. So she fought against... So Stoliarenko's debut in the UFC. And she fought against Lisa Versosa. And Lisa Versosa versus Stoliarenko has to be one of the best fights of the year. I say that the two best fights of the year so far in my head would be Weili Zhang versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Lisa Versosa against Stoliarenko. Those are the two best fights of the year. And so, Stoliarenko, she's making her UFC debut against Yana Kunitskaya. And I think Yana Kunitskaya is coming back from a pregnancy. Yeah, Kunitskaya was gone for a while. And then, yeah. Here's the weird part. I'm looking right now. That's strange. So, the last time Kunitskaya fought was against Aspen Ladd. And then she was gone for a while. I think she was pregnant. And now she's gonna be fighting against Stoliarenko. Dang, that's gonna be a fight of the night candidate. Yeah, that's probably the most excited fight I'm watching for right now. JD, I thought JDS was in this card, but he's gonna be fighting somewhere else. So, Oleinik versus Derrick Lewis. Derrick Lewis fights are hit or miss. They're either the most exciting thing ever or the most boring thing ever. Omari Akhemedov versus Chris Weidman, that's a question mark fight. Darren Stewart against Maki Potolo. I don't know much about, Potolo, but I know I'm very high in Darren Stewart. Kunitskaya versus, Stoliarenko. This will be a fun one. I don't think this fight will ever take around. I think it's gonna be a straight up, like, toe-to-toe, like, stand-up battle here. Then we got Benoni Dariush against Scott Holtzman. Oh, dang! Wow, the first two fights in this card is really good. Very exciting fight here. So, Benoni Dariush, Scott Holtzman, Yana Kunitskaya versus Julia Stoliarenko. Those are two fights that you really should be excited for. Although those fighters aren't all that popular, I highly recommend you go up and watch those two. And the prelims, we got Kevin Holland. Wow. We got Kevin Holland, Yusuf Zalal, Gavin Tucker. Yeah. The prelims are also really dang impressive also. So that's the UFC Fight Nights coming up August 8th at 6 p.m. at the UFC Apex Facility Building. You can watch it on ESPN Plus, and hopefully you do, because it's a card full of a lot of underrated fighters, and it's nice to know none of these fighters are top ranked at all. And it's always interesting for me to see where these fighters are going within the rankings here. So we go from up and coming prospects to, and like middlemen above top 5 rankings in their divisions, with Dana White offering advice to The Rock regarding the XFL. Okay, so this coming in from WrestleInc.com. If none of you have watched the XFL, it's understandable why. So, The Rock, former WWE champion Dwayne The Rock Johnson, yes, the guy from the Fast and Furious movies, and his business partners are in the process of purchasing Vince McMahon's XFL Football League for $15 million. $15 million? Dang! Talk about a deal, kind of. I don't know if the XFL even makes any money. I know in their initial run, they were negative money. They lost money doing the XFL. And the second time through, I did not keep up with the XFL because, well, why would I want to keep up with the XFL? It's just like, no disrespect to the athletes here, but for me, I always like watching the athletes in the highest level. And for mixed martial arts, there are a lot of great fighters all around, though. And there are a lot of great fighters from like Invicta, Strikeforce, Pride, Bellator. There are a lot of fighters in those other organizations that do end up transitioning or making the way up into the UFC. And so for the XFL, though, the XFL is no different to the Canadian Football League. It's no different from arena football. I watch arena football. It's tough. It's really tough to watch arena football. I'm just not excited about it compared to regular football. But congratulations, man. The Rock, he could be getting the XFL Football League for only $15 million. And UFC President Dana White recently spoke with TMZ about The Rock's latest venture. I don't know why he did, but as seen in the video above, so there's a video about it, you're going to see it from TMZ Sports. It's very strange. So it's Dana White talking to the camera. He says, if I was The Rock, I want to try to get that rolling as fast as I could. I tried to get that on television ASAP. I guarantee there's a ton of networks out there that would do it. You have all these multimillionaire athletes that don't want to play right now, White said. All these guys that don't want to play, they want to sit out, don't want to stay in the bubble, don't want to do what it takes. Don't be surprised if The Rock slides into that slot with some great programming, cause let me tell you what, people are dying to watch live sports right now. White also revealed that he was planning to be a sort of COVID-19 advisor to The Rock and his partners. I'm actually going to call him today and walk him through what I think he needs to do on the COVID side of this thing. And I have some ideas for him. Alright, Dana White, look at that, man, working alongside Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Wouldn't think I would ever be saying that ever. What's also very strange about this was that The Rock was pretty much like the deal killer for the initial XFL not being fun to watch. If you don't remember the first ever XFL, there's like a 30 for 30 documentary on the first ever XFL. It's super carny. It was like wrestling, like the fake over dramatic aspect and scripted aspect of pro wrestling added onto NFL, and that makes the XFL here. Because the first thing you see when you watch the first ever XFL, the first episode was Dwayne The Rock Johnson on a Titantron saying, "Hey, I'm Dwayne The Rock Johnson. I love the XFL. I am the XFL. The XFL is great." And then The Rock starts cutting a pro wrestling promo about how much he loves the XFL, and if you don't like the XFL, he's gonna go beat you up. Ridiculous. Absolute ridiculousness. I generally didn't think I'll be talking about the XFL in any capacity in 2020. Now, the XFL season was happening, but then it got canceled because of COVID, and I didn't really hear much about the success of the XFL, but if it's being sold for $15 million, and I know there's an MMA podcast, but I've talked about it before. $15 million in the grand scheme of things as it pertains to athletes is chump change money. Totally honest with you right now. I follow the NBA all the time. There's a season, cause I play all the NBA 2K games. In the NBA 2K games, there's a thing called My League. And in My League, you're offering these athletes, these players, money in order for them to decide for your team. It's no different from being a GM. It's kind of like being a GM in the NBA, NFL, NHL, like any season mode, where your goal is to go and assemble the best team possible. And in the NBA, there's some players who make upwards of $125 million over the span of 5 years. 125 over 5 years. And now The Rock, he bought an organization for only $15 million. And that $125 million they're getting, yeah, that comes before tax and all that stuff, but they're making more money through advertising, through bonuses, through sponsors, there's a lot of NBA athletes, they're actually making extra money and extra revenue doing what Paige Van is doing. And they're doing these like sponsored videos on Instagram, on their social media. So they are making about well over $100 million a year. I think Stephen Curry, a couple of years ago, dating back to 2015, he made about, not 2015, 2017, he made about $30 million. So yeah, $15 million to a UFC athlete, they'll be like, wow, that's awesome, that's amazing. But trust me, $15 million in the grand scheme of things, nothing. I really do wish UFC athletes were being paid more, but then again, there has to be a lot more money being thrown in to the UFC in order for these athletes to go get more money. Unionization can be a thing. If all the MMA athletes, all the UFC athletes stop being like petty divas who are out for themselves, who are trying to sell themselves yeah, it's frustrating. It really is frustrating how there is no union yet for the UFC, because a lot of them still act like kindergarten, like drama people and divas. Ugh. So you're listening to the GSMC MMA Podcast. Coming back right after the short break here, I'll be covering some more news. See you soon.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. So there is a UFC Fight Night event coming up August 8th, this Saturday. And one of the fighters is Chris Weidman. He's been in a downturn lately since winning the belt. He won the belt. He immediately lost to Luke Rockhold very decisively. And so what's going on with Chris Weidman? The former UFC middleweight champion Chris Weidman may have a positive attitude, but that doesn't mean he's oblivious to the fact that he's been knocked out in back-to-back losses while dropping 5 of his last 6 bouts. But hey, random things happen. That's according to the All-American, who explained to MMA Fighting that his losing streak may have more to do with the fact that mixed martial arts is a wild and unpredictable sport and less to do with his physical tools and natural talent. You fight all these really good guys, you're not always going to get your hand raised, Weidman said. There's definitely randomness on who wins that night, random things that happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that person is the better person in the fight. Chris Weidman, who recently turned 36 back in June, will battle former welterweight Omari Akhemedov in UFC Vegas 6 co-main event, which airs exclusively on ESPN Plus Saturday, August 8th. I need to get a freaking W. I need to get back on my winning ways. I think I have a lot of advantages in this fight, but when you're in there, you never know what's going to happen. I'm taking it very serious. It's tough, but when I look at the guys I fought, I don't think he's up there as far as the most talented. Well, of course, Omaree is ranked number 14. Yeah, he's probably one of the more least popular, lower rank guys out there that Chris Weidman has ever fought in recent years. I think that's a fair statement without knocking him. We'll find out this weekend. Okay, so, alright, let's talk about Chris Weidman for a bit here. Me and my cousin, we talk about UFC all the time, alright? And we always say that Chris Weidman has to be one of the worst champions in UFC history, and it's because there is such an asterisk behind his championship reigns. Alright, so he defeated, okay, going back to UFC, I'll do like a quick retrospective on Chris Weidman here. Going back when Chris Weidman was undefeated, July 6, 2013, he defeated Anderson Silva in what had to be the biggest upset in UFC history. No, I'll say it is the biggest upset ever in UFC history. Weidman will forever be known as the guy who ended Anderson Silva's title reign. But when you watch that fight, was it really a case of Chris Weidman being overall better fighter than Anderson Silva, or is Anderson Silva being lazy and not taking that fight also seriously? Yeah, a win is a win. Yeah, Weidman defeated Anderson Silva fairly. But at that point, 2013, Anderson Silva that wasn't the best version of Silva. That wasn't 2010 Anderson Silva. 2011 Anderson Silva even. And then we go to UFC 168, December 28, 2013. Later that year, that was a fight that made everybody look at Anderson Silva. You see Anderson Silva, he threw the leg kick. Silva went down, his leg buckled, and Silva never became the same person ever again. So did Chris Weidman defeat Anderson Silva? Yes, he defeated Anderson Silva that second time through technicality. So the first time he defeated Silva, one could say that was Silva being unmotivated to fight Chris Weidman. Second time, Anderson Silva pretty much injures himself. Now let's go to his second title defense, Lyoto Machida. Lyoto Machida in 2014 was really not good. Really. Now Lyoto Machida, I think now, he looks, I'll say that, Lyoto Machida right now, I think really can defeat Lyoto Machida back in mid 2014. Because, 2014 Lyoto Machida, he wasn't really all that good. Then he fought Vitor Belfort. Okay, so it's the wrestler versus the striker thing with Vitor Belfort back in 2015. Yeah, Belfort is impressive. He really is. But stylistically wise, this was a matchup that was perfect for Chris Weidman to win. He was expected to defeat Lyoto Machida. He was expected to defeat Vitor Belfort. He defeated Anderson Silva off that technicality. And the first time he defeated Anderson Silva, one could say that was Anderson Silva being unmotivated. And then we get to his title fight. His title fight against Luke Rockhold. His first loss ever in UFC history. And this fight ended in the third round. So, actually, it ended in the fourth round. So, Rockhold was defeating Luke Rockhold was defeating Chris Weidman in every single round up to that point. And one could argue that by the end of the third round, Luke Rockhold already should have won. Weidman couldn't take down Rockhold. Rockhold was ground and pounding the heck out of Weidman. And there was absolutely no way Chris Weidman could recover in the going into the fourth round after what he endured in the end of the third. Fourth round happens. Weidman's pretty much done at this point. Luke Rockhold, Weidman attempts a takedown. Luke Rockhold reverses it, goes and does more ground and pound. An absolute fun fight, but it was more of a showcase of how great Luke Rockhold was in that fight. Omaree against Weidman, KO by flying knee. Omaree looked awesome in that fight. Mousasi, TKO by knees. Then he defeated Kelvin Gastelum. So, he defeated Kelvin Gastelum, then he lost to Jacare Renato Souza and Dominic Reyes, two stellar fighters. And that was Chris Weidman debuting into the light heavyweight division. He just couldn't grapple with Dominic Reyes. So yes, Chris Weidman has had many he's won Fight of the Night bonuses. He's won Fight of the Night bonuses, he won Performance of the Night bonuses multiple times. But in the span of 5 years, he's won one fight. And I'm not gonna say it's random. I think it's ridiculous for Chris Weidman to go say that the reason why he lost his fights was because of randomness. And I'm just trying to understand that because you have a long time to prep up for these fighters. You know what anything can happen in the octagon. I wouldn't call it random because all these fighters have, what's random? Was it random for Omaree to throw a flying knee? Kind of, yeah. But there's a fight business. What do you expect? Is it expected that every fighter who goes into the octagon is gonna pull up the same, 2-jab hook combo and go for a shooting for a double leg takedown? What does Weidman expect to happen in the octagon? What, in Chris Weidman's mind, is not random in the octagon? Is it random for Luke Rockhold to reverse a takedown and do ground and pound? Is it random if Chris Weidman opened himself up to get knocked out via knee by Gegard Mousasi and Omaree? Is it random that Jacare Souza and Dominic Reyes knocked him out? What's random about either of those fighters punching him and getting caught? I don't know. I just really don't know what Weidman's head's going on right now. Now, do I hope Weidman wins this fight? Yes. I hope Chris Weidman wins this fight. I want to see fighters bounce back. His debut in the light heavyweight division, ended disastrously. And I don't see why there's any reason for Chris Weidman, especially at this point in his career, to return to the middleweight division. It's ridiculous. It's absolute ridiculous. And I don't know. I just don't know what's going on in Chris Weidman's head right now at this point. And so Chris Weidman, he recently had an interview where he was talking about what he expects out of himself in this upcoming fight. He talks with BGPen.com saying, "I can never make 170 in my life. It could never be an option," Chris Weidman said to Line Movement. "He looks like he's a strong guy, but I can sustain a certain level of strength and pace as a big guy that can wear on a guy that is a little smaller and strong. I think I have a big advantage in that." Chris Weidman also believes he also has the cardio advantage in addition to the size advantage, so he expects to break his opponent mentally and physically on August 8th. "I match up great. He's a tough guy like a caveman from Russia, swings heavy and wild. He's on a nice win streak." He defeated Zach Covington and Tim Butch recently, so yeah, that's a pretty tough streak. He is on a 6-fight win streak, not that he is super known or anything, but he has been doing this in 185-pound division. To be honest, I think I'm better everywhere. He gets tired and swings heavy, not that he is knocking too many people out. He doesn't have many knockouts. He does swing wild, a little unorthodox, but he gets tired. I just think I can pick him apart on the feet, create a crazy pace, and mentally and physically break him. Dang, I think I'm going to crack him with a good shot, take him down, climb to mount, ground and pound him for a TKO. He might give me his neck. I'll take that too. I'm looking at the comments here. Someone says, "This should be Chris Weidman's last fight in the UFC if he loses." Well, I kind of agree, but at the same time, I am not an advocate for a person losing their job. But they did lose 5. They lose 5 of their past 6 fights. And if he loses this fight, he's going to lose 6 of his past 7 fights. And then there's going to be a period of time where he hasn't won a fight in 6 years. So yeah, that's going to be really rough for him. And so the reason why I'm focusing a lot right now on the co-main event instead of the main event is because Aleksei Oleinik versus Derrick Lewis, especially Derrick Lewis, it's very random. I know I talk about Chris Weidman saying what's random in UFC. I don't think there is randomness in the UFC, but what I mean random for Derrick Lewis, it's in the sense that I don't know what type of Derrick Lewis I'm going to be seeing. Am I going to see the destroyer Derrick Lewis? Or am I going to see very bad cardio Derrick Lewis? Because I always say, he has to be one of the most boring or most exciting fighters in the UFC. So I'm currently on ESPN right now, and there's a debate going on about what people expect from this fight here. And so, how this fight's going to go off. Oleinik is tough. Oleinik is a very, very good striker. Very underrated here. But this is the wrestler versus the grappler battle here. If Aleksei Oleinik just shoots it for a takedown, grapples with Derrick Lewis, Oleinik wins. Like, that's not even a debate or an argument. Derrick Lewis is going to lose this fight if he gets taken out by Aleksei Oleinik. And he's not really good at all defending himself in takedowns or in the ground. So if Oleinik takes him down, goes for a rear naked choke, which isn't all that difficult to do against Derrick Lewis, considering the skill level of Aleksei Oleinik, then Oleinik should win this fight. But how I see this fight going on right now, it'll be both fighters, they're gonna go in. I don't think Oleinik is even gonna have a successful takedown or be that urgent in going for a takedown until maybe the middle to end of the second round. At the minimum. I don't think so. I think first round will be both fighters trading off. Will be Oleinik trying to wear down Derrick Lewis, because right now, like, who hits harder? Obviously Derrick Lewis. Derrick Lewis is one of the hardest hitting guys in all of the UFC. Oleinik, he's a really good technical striker, not the hardest hitter, but really good at his boxing. His boxing is very, very underrated here. And also his leg kicks also. Really good leg kicks. So Aleksei Oleinik, he's gonna slowly wear down Lewis. And then Lewis, in the beginning of the second round, is gonna be very reckless. He's gonna be overly aggressive. And after the 2-minute mark of Derrick Lewis chasing Aleksei Oleinik. Oleinik is gonna go duck under, he's gonna shoot him for a double leg takedown, and go for a submission victory. That's how I believe the fight is how it's gonna go end. And I'm looking at everyone else's opinions and viewpoints here. Here's the strange part. Derrick Lewis has only tapped out once in his UFC career. Yes. And that was to Daniel Cormier. So it's understandable as to why someone would think, oh man, Derrick Lewis, there's no way he can be really submitted again. Aleksei Oleinik, I think he matches perfectly well Daniel Cormier. I would like to see Aleksei Oleinik versus Daniel Cormier. I think that would be a very, very fun fight. Now that fight I don't think is ever going to happen, considering Oleinik's stance right now in the heavyweight division, where he's ranked, and Daniel Cormier saying he wants this to be the last fight in his career. Sadly, that's a dream fight for me that I'm never going to see. But Aleksei Oleinik is, I think in the top 10, he's one of the only guys you really have to respect in terms of ground wrestling. Yes, there's Fabricio Verdum. That's another person, but Oleinik right now I see is a better grappler than Verdum. And Lewis, for the most part in his career, hasn't fought with other submission artists or submission-based fighters in the heavyweight division because grapplers in the heavyweight division are kind of a rarity. So yeah, Derrick Lewis has only tapped out once in his UFC career, but that was against Daniel Cormier, and there are not that many great grapplers in the heavyweight division. So Oleinik versus Lewis. Lewis is a tough guy, but he's not as skilled as Oleinik, and he's not skilled enough to defend the takedown, to defend the wrestling. And I don't even think Derrick Lewis's boxing is any more better than Aleksei Oleinik. I don't think so. I think as who's a more dynamic striker, I would say Oleinik. But Derrick Lewis, he has that one-punch knockout, and so that's why you gotta be worried about him. So you're listening to the GSMC MMA Podcast, coming back right after the short break here.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. So coming up this Saturday is UFC Fight Night. But next month is a very interesting matchup. We have Paula Kosa against Israel Adesanya. And I'm not sure if any of you guys have seen this, but you guys should look it up. So, there's a video out there with Paula Kosa. He landed 23 leg kicks in just 12 seconds. And I look at, and I'm looking at how Paula Kosa is training. So apparently, leg kicks are going to be a huge aspect or an important part to Paula Kosa's game against Adesanya. Yeah, I'm thinking about that. Because with the way how Adesanya fights, Adesanya is a counter fighter. Like, for the most part, Adesanya fights his opponents moving backwards. And he pummels his opponent through it. And with the way how Paula Kosa fights, because I'm comparing how these two fighters fought against Yoel Romero in their other past matchups. But since the Yoel Romero fight, both of them have fought Yoel, and they both fought Yoel very, very, very differently. So with how that fight went, it was Paula Kosa pretty much putting the pressure onto Yoel Romero, and Yoel Romero would go push back. Compared to the Adesanya Yoel Romero fights, which is just like, you got one skinny statue, and you got one gigantic statue, and they're just both standing there, and they're both like a little bit poking each other. Two very completely different fights here. And so, if what Paula Kosa is doing is going to translate over to his fight against Israel Adesanya, I'm guessing Paulo Costa is going to aim for leg kicks. He's going to aim for leg kicks, and he's going to go try to chop down the long legs of Adesanya, because if you look at Adesanya's stance, what Adesanya does is that he leans over, he puts his left leg forward, his right leg a little bit back, his left leg is kind of bent, his knees a little bit bent, and then he leans his body backwards. And so with the way how it looks, Adesanya will always have enough time to go react to a punch. That's why he's a really good defensive fighter. He's a really good defensive fighter, and he's really good at counter punches. Is because with the way how Adesanya's stance is, he's kind of baiting his opponent to go shoot in for a takedown, but he has such a strong base that he can go and defend the takedown. But not only does he have a strong base and he has a stance that's good against defending the takedown, he gives enough distance between his opponent and his own head, because he's leaning back, that he can go and duck under, or he can go sway, or he can go parry certain jabs or strikes or hooks. Izzy's stance is really good for defensive boxing and defensive striking here. But the one issue that Izzy has as it pertains to his stance is that it's really good at defending for takedowns and defending against headhunters, but it's not good for fighters to go shoot in for leg kicks. Like, I've seen it a lot. I've seen it. I'm always talking about this. Why don't more fighters shoot in for leg kicks? And I know why. And it's because when they shoot in for a leg kick, then there's a small slight opening for their opponent to go and hit him with a hard jab or Superman punch. Because you go in for a leg kick, you're opening yourself up to a free strike from your opponent. But what Paulo Costa is doing in his training right now is that he's trying to get the transition between body and leg kicks into short hooks. So what he's going to do, he's going to shoot in, he's going to go for a leg kick, and then what Izzy Adesanya would do in an actual fight, was that after a leg kick, Izzy would go respond with leaning in for a jab or a long punch. And what Paulo Costa is going to do is that he's going to go for a leg kick, he's going to go duck under, and he's going to shoot in for a couple of small short hooks. Because I don't think Adesanya is really good fighting in the mid and in the long range, but once he dives in deep for the close range, because you can look at it in the Omaree versus Adesanya fight. Adesanya, and even his fight against Robert Whittaker, Adesanya is very, very uncomfortable fighting within the range of dirty boxing. He's not comfortable with fighters who go in for short hooks. He's not comfortable doing these 50-50 exchanges where he's not going to go maximize his reach. So if Paulo Costa is going to go shoot in for a leg kick, and he's going to bait Israel Adesanya to go shoot in for a surround punch or for a hard jab, Paulo Costa can go counter his counter with a short couple hooks, and he can go do that, and he can go and do damage onto Adesanya. But once again, the issue with that strategy though is that Paulo Costa has to accept that he will go get tagged by Adesanya, which is expected. I mean, it's a championship fight, right? And so this fight here, Paulo Costa will definitely try to make the fight exciting. And if Israel Adesanya is perfectly fine going in for the bait, knowing that he can go handle, or he can endure whatever Costa's gonna give back, then yeah, this fight could be incredibly exciting. It could be very similar to Robert Whittaker versus Adesanya. Hopefully this fight will be a lot more exciting than Omaree versus Adesanya, but knowing how these two fighters fight, considering that Omaree is a counter fighter, and Paulo Costa is the type of fighter who likes applying the pressure, then you know what? This is in terms of style wise, these two fighters are meant to make something really exciting. And so we got something here. So Daniel Cormier, his last fight is coming up this month, his potential last fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov, and is coming in from MMAJunkie.com, and that Daniel Cormier says he was taken a little back by Khabib's return for UFC 54, so Khabib is making a comeback on October. It was rumored he was going to come back in September, but that was before his father's passing. Now he's going to shoot in for an October return. It was a short time ago when Daniel Cormier expressed uncertainty about Khabib's fighting future in the wake of his father passing. Then Khabib was booked to defend his lightweight title against Justin Gaethje, and many were surprised about the timeline. The timeline being UFC 254 on October 24. Me too. Cormier and Nurmagomedov are good friends and teammates at American Kickboxing Academy, aka in San Jose. Cormier has been seeing firsthand how tightly bound the relationship between Khabib is with his father. Cormier has previously vocalized his concerns about how soon, if ever, the Eagle would soar back into the octagon. The lightweight title unification bout is now official, with interim champion Justin Gaethje against Khabib, and Daniel Cormier says he's a little nervous. This is according to MMA Junkie. I was a little nervous initially. Not nervous, I was taken a little back. After I did the show for ESPN talking about it, I've heard that Khabib was looking more at getting going sooner than later. So when the announcement was made, it didn't surprise me because I had the inclination it was going to happen, but I thought he would still be away for a while, but nothing makes me happier than my champion coming back and defending his belt. Cormier has an important fight of his own coming up against Stipe Miocic, and Daniel Cormier himself says in a preview, like there's a video preview about Cormier talking about his upcoming fight, and he says, I'm probably going to be taking a step back. So, I'm just going to be honest with you, in the year of 2020, how predictable it is, there are a lot of fighters, like, leaving. And it makes the most sense right now. So, Henry Cejudo, he dropped 2 title divisions. Like, he was a champion for 2 different divisions, and then he retired. There's speculation for Amanda Nunes that she could be retiring, and she's a champion for also 2 other divisions. We got Daniel Cormier, who was a 2-division champion. And then you hear John Jones saying that he's open to vacating his title. Then you have Daniel Cormier, who, if he were to defeat Stipe Miocic, would be the heavyweight champion. He would retire as champion. And then you have Khabib Nurmagomedov, where it is speculated that he will retire undefeated. That's if he defeats Justin Gaethje, and it's if Khabib were to be matched up against GSP or some other person. He would retire 30-0 as the lightweight champion. Currently, so far, there are very few constants happening right now in the UFC as it pertains to his champions. Okay, I'm gonna look it up. Let me look at all the UFC champions right now, and how many of them were champions coming up in the year of 2020? Like, how many of them were champions in 2019 and retain it through 2020? I'm looking at it right now. So, we have John Jones could be vacating his light heavyweight belt. Davison Figueiredo just recently became the flyweight champion just a month ago. Peter Yan just became bantamweight champion just a month ago. Alexander Volkanovski, he recently won the belt from Max Holloway and then defended it properly. Great for him. But coming to 2020, man, nobody would have predicted Volkanovski becoming the champion. And then we have Khabib, who we don't know what his status is. We don't really know. Kamaru Usman, he seems to be one of the only champions out there that's consistent and that's available. But he was supposed to fight against Gilbert Burns, and then that fight dropped. And they fought against Jorge Masvidal. And Kamaru Usman has to be one of the more least likable personalities out there in the UFC to watch. We have Israel Adesanya, who is a great fighter, but his recent performance against Yoel Romero really soured a lot of people. And looking over, we got Stipe Miocic. But if we were to lose the belt against Daniel Cormier, then Daniel Cormier will go and vacate the belt. Then Amanda Nunes is a double champion. Valentina Shevchenko, and Amanda Nunes could be retiring also for all we know. Valentina Shevchenko, she's currently unavailable. She was supposed to fight against Joanne Calderwood. And since Valentina is out recovering through an injury, Calderwood ended up fighting Jennifer Maia, and Jennifer Maia ended up taking Joanne Calderwood's place as the number one contender. And then we have Weili Zhang, and we don't know when we can expect Weili Zhang to come back in the year 2020 because of this whole COVID pandemic issue. So yeah, it's a mess. It's a total mess right now in the grand scheme of things as it pertains to the champions. I'm gonna tell you right now, by the year of 2021, we are gonna have a completely different set of champions. By the end of the year 2021, we're going to have a different set of champions, all new. I don't know what to expect because so much can happen in the UFC in just a year right now. Currently, so far, my favorite champions are Weili Zhang and Israel Adesanya. Those are my 2 favorite champions to watch right now because I know I can expect those two to still compete at the highest level in the next 2 years in their respective divisions. That's what I can expect. Kamaru Usman, we hear rumors of Kamaru Usman rumbling that they think about moving up to lightweights. And if he does that, what's going to happen to the welterweight belt? I'm not really sure. Also, the welterweight division is comprised of a whole lot of, like, unlikable people. So, that's an issue right now with the welterweight division. And we go from horrible people to really good people. So this is coming in from BloodyElbow.com. Wonderboy Stephen Thompson says Colby Covington is terrible and tries way too hard. One of the nicest people ever in UFC, Wonderboy Stephen Thompson, currently ranked number 6 in the welterweight division. Wonderboy Stephen Thompson listened in an interview where he's discussing about public personas. Stephen Thompson being one of those fighters out there that's getting really popular right now on YouTube, because you probably have seen it before, where it says UFC fighter Stephen Thompson breaks down martial arts scenes, because the guy does martial arts also, and he breaks down scenes from movies, and he has interviews a lot. Like, Wonderboy Stephen Thompson, he's doing a really good job, you know, making himself look as good as he can to the public image here. And he's talking about public personas. Wonderboy Stephen Thompson made the observation that some fighters like Conor McGregor, with his gift for gab, and the authenticity of the Diaz brothers, make them natural for the spotlights. But the same can't be said for others. Like Colby Covington, who is terrible at it, and is just trying way too hard. All the same, Wonderboy Stephen Thompson says, I just want to know what he has to say about me. Whatever it might be, you can bet it would be said from a hot tub next to a woman who looks very paid to be there. Wow, that's like super wholesome for Wonderboy over there. So, Wonderboy Stephen Thompson. Regardless of where UFC puts Wonderboy Stephen Thompson, the 37-year-old says he feels great and hopes his retirement comes later rather than sooner. As for, he's 37? The guy looks awesome for 37, man. Man. He's only 37? I swear I thought Wonderboy Stephen Thompson was like 32, 33? Maybe? But oh man, that'd be a fun matchup. Wonderboy Stephen Thompson against Colby Covington. The story of good versus evil. I think, in terms of a storyline, in terms of a narrative, that's a very fun one. And obviously everyone would cheer for Stephen Thompson. Do I agree with Wonderboy here? Yes. I also agree with Donald Cerrone in that there definitely are a subset of fighters, actually a growing number of fighters over the past couple of years, that are trying to be pro wrestling heels or pro wrestling characters to get themselves over. Now, Colby Covington has successfully done it in a very aggravating, annoying way. Albeit, like, it worked. Colby Covington was able to get himself popular enough to go get in for a title fight and get some people looking at him. So I can't deny that what he did is working well for his career. But that doesn't mean I have to like the guy. So, but Colby Covington versus Wonderboy Stephen Thompson, in terms of a narrative, in terms of story, in terms of fight that can be booked, that's gonna be a really fun matchup, and I would love to see a fight between those two fighters. Because A, they're both great fighters, and B, it'll be a fun story. Good versus bad. So you're listening to the GSMC MMA Podcast. Come back right after the short break here. See you soon.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
And we are back. And so every podcast I like to end off with something that strays away from just being MMA news. And I found a forum here, I talked about this last week, in that I always enjoy trying to understand why people are into or not into certain aspects as it pertains to mixed martial arts. Earlier today, I was doing an interview with two people who don't watch mixed martial arts, and they gave me very different responses. One of them said that I told them, hey, what's the first image you think of when you think of a mixed martial arts fan? One person said, well, I think of some dad, I think of a dad wearing tattoos, a bunch of dumb, like, face tattoos, a bunch of dumb body tattoos, and they're all drunk, they're holding a beer, and they're just yelling in front of the camera. And we've all seen that image. We've all seen the weird white guy with the words UFC, or with the letters UFC on his forehead with the beer being like, yeah! Like those guys. The type of person that would be wearing an Affliction shirt. And then another person said that their image of the everyday mixed martial arts fan is just a person who really cares about being in shape a lot. Two very different responses there. And it's always interesting to see what people are into and not into with mixed martial arts. And I'm right now here, this is coming in from Reddit, MMA comments, what are your MMA hot takes? And last week I talked about this, and I'll read some more about it. And I'll give my personal viewpoint, and you yourself, so you can go think of whatever you want to think about the hot takes. But what kind of hot takes do you have? Don't forget to message us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, on what your hot takes are for mixed martial arts. First one coming in from Noodles Czar. I try to hype up fights for my friends who are huge sports fans, and they seem so apathetic to it. They were all engrossed in a 10-hour Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance, which I watched, but I don't think any of them tuned in for the fights last week. Doesn't make sense to me, but whoever floats your boat. Alright then, so I'll be honest with you right now. That 10-hour documentary on Michael Jordan is a really good documentary, and that documentary is way more engrossing than a whole lot of mixed martial arts fights. I'm gonna be honest with you, when I watched Jorge Masvidal versus Kamaru Usman, when it got to the third round, that's when I just popped up my phone and started like text messaging random people or looking up random videos or random memes or just started looking at social media and stuff because I got really bored by the end of the third round for the fight. For the Michael Jordan documentary, it's always bam, bam, bam. The way how that documentary is shot with its pacing, with its editing, there's always something happening on screen. There's no moments in that documentary where you weren't gonna learn something. Whether it be 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, you're learning something. You're learning the narrative here. For mixed martial arts, you can say that also, but then again, there's a lot of patience. There's a lot of patience for mixed martial arts that's really envelop the everyday average fan. So I was asking them to, what would it take for mixed martial arts to go be interesting or to be enjoyable to them? I asked my other friends about what can mixed martial arts do, and some of them said, I don't like it when a lot of these fights are just one dude wrestling or one dude grappling, or you don't get the full context or the narrative or the story here. Because I told them, hey, who's Jorge Masvidal? You can write an essay about the narrative and the stories of fighters like Jorge Masvidal, of a Ben Askren, of a Colby Covington, of a Conor McGregor. And I felt like in order for you to really get these characters, you have to go out of your way and try to sort them out. Alright then? Yeah, you can watch the UFC the countdowns, and you can hear the commentary team talking about Colby Covington. You can hear the press releases and stuff. But unless you're really captivated by Colby Covington and you're following him through like Twitter, through his Instagram, and through multiple like source feeds, you're not gonna get the full scope of Colby Covington. As for the documentary, the viewer is being handholded to all the situation. But if you've never heard of Colby Covington, and then he's prepped up to go fight against Tyron Woodley, which he is prepped up to fight against, you need to like go and backtrack to 3 years of Colby Covington stuff to get Colby Covington. Same thing with Chael Sonnen. If Chael Sonnen were to retire right now and he were to fight somebody, and then I try to get my fans into watching that Chael Sonnen match, they're not gonna care. Because in my mind, because I know Chael Sonnen's character and the shtick, and I've been following his career for a long time, I understand Chael Sonnen's character. For them, they just see this guy who's just talking trash, and that's about it. And one of them would be like, well, what's so special about this guy? What's so special about Chael Sonnen? And I'll tell him, well, he's really good at trash talking. And I'm like, yeah, but like the other person trash talk also. What makes his trash talking any more better? Like, apparently trash talking isn't all that appealing, especially if the person who's doing the trash talking, he doesn't have that much of a strong merit. And Chael Sonnen's strongest merit is the fact that he lost. It really is. Like his greatest merit ever is the fact that he had a really good showing against Anderson Silva, almost won. And in the world of sports, where there are so many winners, it's hard to place the narrative of someone almost winning at a high pedestal. That's the sad truth about Chael Sonnen. Now, I understand. I get it. There kind of is an appeal for that type of character, for that type of personality there, but for the casual fans, they don't really care that much. One here, I'm not sure this unpopular. The UFC media machine has truly built 2 stars. I feel like the last decade being Ronda, Conor, Izzy, John Bones are not mainstream. Yeah, they're not mainstream. Israel Adesanya and John Bones Jones is not mainstream, and the reason why Israel Adesanya isn't mainstream is because the UFC or whoever Izzy's agents are, they're not placing them in the forefront of media. I don't think Izzy or John Jones care about TV shows, commercials, and movies. They just want to do their own thing. If for someone in the UFC to be a larger-than-life star, they gotta go beyond the octagon. And there are a lot of fighters nowadays who are so focused on the octagon, they don't really care about anything else, and I don't mind that at all. Colby Covington tries that. He tries, but Colby Covington doesn't have a future in movies or in television. Tyron Woodley, to an extent, does that right now. He's playing the game. But he's such an unlikable dude that it's hard to actually be committed to following this dude when he tries to venture out into movies and reporting and acting and all that stuff. It's difficult. I think Sean O'Malley can do it. No. If the UFC needs another big mainstream star, they gotta really push an athlete who has larger aspirations than that of the octagon and is likable and is interesting or intriguing. Our person here, do most fans really think it's that big of a sport to the masses? So, I'm right now working on this mini documentary now. I'll get to it. But I ask people, hey, how much money is being brought into the UFC? And I brought up the average salaries for NBA and NFL players, and they all said pretty much the same thing. They said, okay, if the average salary for an NBA player is $7.7 million, and the average salary for an NFL player is about $2.7 million, them in their own mind, they're like, well, it has to be at least over $1 million, or $1.5 million. And then I dropped the bombshell that it was just under $200,000, and they were freaked. They gave the same exact shock face. So yeah, even casual fans think that MMA fighters should go be paid higher. But then again, man, if they're being paid just under $200K, $150K a year, which is what a lot of mid to top tier fighters are making, even fighters in the top 5 in the rankings. I know Tyron Woodley, he made about $200K. Tyron Woodley is really up there in terms of his status in the UFC. Only made $200K. Now, for some people, $200K is a lot. For an athlete, small potatoes. Small. Someone says Henry Cejudo can defeat Derrick Lewis. I don't know. Around here, Yoel Romero is actually horribly... Yeah, Yoel Romero, he purposely doesn't wrestle. I think I've come to the conclusion that although he's a great wrestler, he just doesn't want to wrestle. He just doesn't. And it's not because of his lack of him not wanting to do it, though. It's more of a sense of, it's just not healthy for him for his neck. Strangely enough, he would rather be more comfortable boxing than he would wrestling. Ronda Rousey could come back and beat 95% of the bantamweight division. No, I don't really think so about that. I don't think every NBA or NFL player would be a great fighter. They would be great athletes. I'll tell you right now, an NBA player or an NFL player pursuing... Okay, so an NBA player or an NFL player pursuing the path of an MMA fighter, it really helps them a lot. It really does. It's no different from, let's say you do track and field, alright? You do track and field, and then you're making the transition into boxing. Well, being good in track and field shows that you already have some cardio. And so you have cardio, you have dedication, you already have a mindset, and you already know how to deal with training, how to deal with long hours of training. And so, a person who's really good at running, who does the sprints or marathon stuff, if they're to go make the transition into being a fighter, well, they have all the physical tools already to an extent, and you just have to go and mold them into being a great fighter. Also, here's the thing, MMA athletes, they're far, far from the best athletes in the world. And that's all I jab on them. It really is the truth. With all this talking about camo tie-dye shorts, how about Reebok making custom shorts only for top 15 or top 10 fighters in every division? It's good aesthetically, and it lets casual fans know who's elite or worthy to watch. Okay, I don't think the casual audience cares all that much about the certain trunks that's being worn by fighters. I don't really think so. Now, one of my friends was able to spot, like, all the brands. Like, she watched, like, one fight and was able to spot on, like, in her own head memorize all the brands, which is insane to me. So she's like, okay, look at those two fighters there. Look at the monsters. Alright then, I got Rockstar right over there. Oh, look at that tire company. John Jones is being tested by God about right now. Kind of weird. Probably not an unpopular opinion, but I think UFC should abandon the pay-per-view system. I get mixed up money, hand over fist, but I'd enjoy seeing the day where fighters get paid way more the way I see it. I see happening through massive sponsorship deals. It's, okay, the pay-per-view has nothing to do with the fighters making as much. It's the sponsorships, and the sponsorship stems from the UFC, with the money going in towards the pockets of the higher brass of the UFC and the organization, and then the UFC then makes a budget of how much of that money is then being given to the fighters. So pay-per-views, in my viewpoint, do not actually play a major role or big role for how much money a fighter is going to make. All that matters are the TV deals. What matters are also the sponsorship deals that the UFC makes. Whether or not the UFC is pay-per-view or not, actually, according to the WWE, there are a lot of, like, pro wrestlers that actually lost money when they made the transition from pay-per-view into having all their pay-per-views being purely going through the streams. Their revenues, they're like Netflix-esque kind of stream in the WWE network. So right now, if they were to move from the pay-per-view thing, which is outdated, and move it towards streaming and have it be more accessible, the fighters are actually going to lose money. They're going to lose money, and the UFC are going to slightly lose some money, so it doesn't help out all around if they transition from pay-per-views into purely streaming or some other avenue right now. If fighters want to make more money, then the UFC should go and micromanage their budget and increase the budgeting for how much they're going to go pay the fighters. It's unacceptable that they charge so much for the product and give so little to the fighters. I don't know. I'm the type of person nowadays, because someone is complaining that, okay, so I pay for ESPN Plus. And I buy the pay-per-views. I know some of my friends right now who currently got laid off, actually due as a result of the COVID-19 issue. And $60 or $100, it's not a lot to them. I mean, it's a lot to them, but to a person like me and to a subset of my group of friends, $100 or $60 a month is not all that much. It really isn't in the grand scheme of things. It varies person by person. To me, spending $60 to $100 per month isn't all that much. I'm spending way more than that at a per monthly basis right now for multiple things. So it's not a huge, that's not big money for me, but it's big money to a whole lot of my friends, and it's understandable. Everybody has their own budgets. And so I got through that pretty quickly, actually. There's more MMA hot takes coming up next week, and this will be the end of today's episode. You have been a great audience. All I gotta say is thank you. Thank you for listening to the GSMC MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.